There's a certain moment that happens to almost everyone who gets deep into tech. You start simple, maybe with one operating system, one device, one way of doing things. But over Chimi, things get messy. You end up with multiple systems, different tools, different environments that don't quite talk to each other the way you want. And somewhere in that chaos, a question starts forming in your mind. What if there was one system that could do everything? Not just most things, not just well enough, but truly everything. Servers, desktops, development, gaming, customization, automation, even things you didn't think were possible. And that's where things start to get interesting, because in the world of Linux, that idea isn't just theoretical. There actually is a kind of system that comes surprisingly close to that dream. And when you first encounter it, it feels a little bit insane. Imagine booting into an operating system that doesn't assume anything about how you want to use your computer. It doesn't come preloaded with dozens of apps you may never touch. It doesn't lock you into a specific workflow or aesthetic. Instead, it gives you something much more raw, much more flexible. It gives you control at a level most people never experience. At first, that might sound intimidating, maybe even impractical. But the deeper you go, the more you realize that this level of control is exactly what makes it capable of doing everything. Think about how most operating systems work. They're designed for a broad audience. That means they make choices for you. They decide how updates happen, how software is installed, how the interface looks, and often how much you're allowed to change. This makes things easier for beginners, but it also creates limitations. You're always working within a box, even if it's a very polished one. Now imagine removing that box entirely. Suddenly, instead of adapting your workflow to the system adapts to you. This is where a certain type of Linux setup enters the picture, often described as minimal, rolling, and highly customizable. It doesn't aim to be everything out of the box. Instead, it becomes everything because of what you build on top of it. And that's the key idea that makes it feel so powerful and, at the same time, a little bit crazy. You're not just using an operating system anymore. You're constructing your own. When you first install it, it might feel almost empty. There's no flashy desktop environment welcoming you with animations and icons. Sometimes there isn't even a graphical interface at all. Just a command line, waiting. For someone used to traditional systems, that can feel like stepping into a void. But that void is actually where the magic begins. Because from that point forward, every piece of the system is something you chose. On a lightweight, fast desktop that uses almost no resources, you can build that on a visually stunning environment with transparency effects and custom animations. You can build that to want your system to behave like a server, a development lab, and a gaming machine all at once. That's entirely possible. And because everything is modular, you're never stuck with decisions you made earlier. You can tear things down and rebuild them as many times as you want. One of the most fascinating aspects of this kind of Linux system is how it handles software. Instead of relying on fixed versions and slow update cycles, it uses a rolling release model. That means your system is constantly evolving. New features, improvements, and updates arrive continuously rather than in big, disruptive jumps. It's like your operating system is always moving forward, always adapting. But here's the twist. You're still in control of when and how those updates happen. Then there's the software ecosystem itself, which is where things start to feel almost limitless. Beyond official repositories filled with thousands of packages, there's often a massive community-driven collection of software that includes everything from niche tools to cutting-edge experimental projects. If something exists, chances are you can install it. And if it doesn't exist, you can often build it yourself or modify something close. This leads to a very different relationship with your computer. Instead of being a passive user, you become an active participant. You start understanding how things fit together, how components interact, how performance can be optimized. You're not just clicking buttons anymore. You're shaping the system at a fundamental level, and that's where the idea of running everything starts to make sense. Because when you have this level of control, the boundaries between different use cases begin to disappear. You can run development environments for multiple programming languages, each isolated and configured exactly how you want. You can set up containers and virtual machines to simulate entire networks or test different systems. You can turn your machine into a media server, a cloud node, a gaming platform, or all of them at once. Gaming, in particular, is an area where things have changed dramatically. For a long time, Linux wasn't seen as a serious gaming platform. But now, with compatibility layers and performance improvements, a huge portion of modern games can run smoothly. And because you control the system, you can fine-tune performance in ways that are simply not possible on more restrictive platforms. You can strip out unnecessary processes, optimize resource usage, and create an environment that's tailored specifically for gaming. But it's not just about performance, it's also about freedom. You're not locked into a single storefront or ecosystem. You can use multiple platforms, different tools, and even older software that might not be supported elsewhere. This flexibility extends far beyond gaming. It applies to everything you do. Another aspect that makes this system feel almost unreal is automation. Once you start scripting and configuring your environment, you realize how much of your workflow can be automated. Tasks that used to take minutes or hours can be reduced to a single command. Entire setups can be recreated from scratch in a matter of minutes using configuration files and scripts. It's like having a blueprint for your perfect system that you can deploy anytime, anywhere. And then there's the community, which plays a huge role in making all of this possible. Unlike closed ecosystems where development is controlled by a single company, this world is driven by people who are passionate about what they're building. They share knowledge, create tools, write documentation, and help each other solve problems. This collective effort results in a system that's constantly improving and expanding. Of course, this level of power comes with its own challenges. It's not always easy. There are moments when things break, when updates cause unexpected issues, when you have to troubleshoot and dig deep to find solutions. But strangely, that's part of the appeal, because every problem you solve makes you understand your system better. Every fix you implement gives you more confidence and control. Over time, you start to see your operating system not as a static product, but as a living project, something that evolves with you, something that reflects your preferences, your needs, your creativity, and that's a very different experience from using a typical system where everything is predefined. There's also something deeply satisfying about building something from the ground up. When you install a new component, configure a service, or customize your interface, you're not just adding features. You're shaping an environment that's uniquely yours. No two setups are exactly the same, because no two users have the same vision. And that's what makes the idea of a Linux system that runs everything so compelling. It's not about having a single monolithic OS that tries to do everything out of the box. It's about having a foundation that allows you to create a system that can do anything you want. The flexibility is so extreme that it almost feels unreal. At some point you realize that the system isn't the limitation anymore. The only limitation is your imagination and your willingness to learn. If you can think of a use case, there's probably a way to implement it. And if there isn't, you can create one. This leads to some truly creative setups. People build systems that automatically adapt to their workflow, switching configurations based on what they're doing. Others create minimal environments that boot in seconds and use almost no resources. Some turn their machines into powerful servers that run dozens of services simultaneously. And many combine all of these ideas into something that's uniquely theirs. There's also a philosophical aspect to all of this. In a world where technology is increasingly controlled and standardized, having a system that gives you complete freedom feels almost rebellious. It's a reminder that computers are tools, and you should be able to use them however you want. But perhaps the most surprising thing is how addictive this can become. Once you experience this level of control and flexibility, it's hard to go back. Other systems start to feel restrictive. Even if they're more polished or user-friendly, you begin to appreciate the power of simplicity, the elegance of modular design, and the satisfaction of solving problems on your own terms. And that's why this kind of Linux system feels so crazy. Not because it's chaotic or unstable, but because it challenges the way we think about operating systems. It shows that you don't need a one-size-fits-all solution. You can have something that adapts to you, that grows with you, that becomes whatever you need it to be. In the end, the idea of a Linux OS that runs everything isn't about a specific distribution or a single piece of software. It's about a philosophy, a way of thinking about technology that prioritizes freedom, flexibility, and control. It's about breaking away from limitations and exploring what's possible when you take full ownership of your system. And once you step into that world, you start to see your computer differently. Not just as a device, but as a platform for creativity, experimentation, and endless possibilities. Something that can truly do everything. Not because it was designed that way from the start, but because you made it that way.